But here's the key. The priorities in our marriage, actually I heard this in a sermon one time.
Which was actually really good.
And here were the priorities, okay? So we had our life, we had our marriage, we had our children, I had a job, we had a church. And
I was a stay-at-home mom.
And you were a stay-at-home mom. And so here's our priority. The first priority in our life for each one of us was God himself, all right? The second priority, our spouse. The third priority down the line would be the children. The fourth priority would be my job.
Right.
I had to provide for the family. And the fifth priority was church and church activities and church commitments. Not to confuse God and church.
Right.
All right? Church is a community of believers. We were dedicated and involved in our church, but our church would not take precedent over our relationship with God or over our relationship with each other. So the issue being, once children are in our marriage, how do we stay connected? As opposed to, getting focused on the children and losing time. Forgetting about the marriage, or having the marriage lower in importance to one of us or the other or both of us, right?
Well, I have to say, when we first found out we were pregnant, which was about 2 months after we got married, we had gone on a honeymoon, and our first reaction was, quick, we better go do things that,
we won't be able to ever do again.
We won't be able to ever do again, so we decided to take another trip.
Yeah, I actually asked for permission for a week without pay, because I had used up my vacation on the honeymoon. And my boss was like, well, pay, okay, that's fine.
So I think it was 3 or 4 months later, after our wedding and honeymoon, we went on another trip.
We went up to the mountains camping.
Quick, we got to do it before we have
We'll never be able to camp again. We'll never be able to take a trip to the mountains again. Children are coming.
Right.
Oh, actually, that's not true, it turns out. But
yeah, but that was our reaction. And then even, I think we went out to dinner a lot.
Yes.
Before our oldest was
to experience life as a couple.
Oh,
yes.
Also, we could.
Yeah.
But it was this idea, quick, we won't ever be able to go out to dinner again. We won't be able to do this again. And as it turns out, that's not true. Children are very portable.
Yes. You have a newborn baby.
Particularly a newborn baby.
A new one.
Just sleep all the time.
You even your first newborn baby, well, they come along with you, but yeah, it's not a big problem. Now you have a little bit more paraphernalia, the car seat, diaper bag, but that's all. If you adapt to that, it's pretty easy to live as a couple with a child in the family, right? So,
and for us, having a child right away, that was a good thing, that we were able to do all these things that we would have done. We might not have even done all of them if we didn't have a child, but so we had, I think, a lot of fun.
Yeah, we did.
In that first year leading up to when Michael was born.
Yeah, and then we had our firstborn, Michael, and then we had the secondborn was just 18 months later. 15 months later. And then the third one
was
18 months after that. And then
22 months.
22 months.
Something like that.
And then another 22 months.
I have to calculate. You kind of lose track of.
Yeah, but it was so we ended up finally with 7 children. Now our marriage.
But even with kids, I mean, what did we do? We'd go for walks together. There's all sorts of things that we would do with our kids.
We enjoyed each other's company. One thing we always did when the children were little was we would make sure that we would have time together. They were in bed by 7:30, 8 or 7.
Initially, when they were real little,
yeah,
and 7, and then we'd have 3 hours in the evening. That was us.
That was our time, And what we did as a family, we didn't watch TV. We didn't spend time once we put the kids together watching TV, what we would do is we decided to study the Bible. We wanted to have some sort of ministry, and eventually, but realized, well, in order to do that, we need to study. So we took correspondence classes, at universities.
But the first thing we started when we got married was we decided to read through the Bible.
Yes.
I wouldn't say together, but we each were doing it independently.
On the same schedule.
On the same schedule, though. And I have to say, that brings a lot into the marriage, a lot of conversation.
Yes.
When you share, you're reading something and you discover something in Scripture, well, it's, I think, easy if a couple doesn't have any outside input to feel like your marriage gets stale. If you
Right.
have no other conversations with people, if you don't. But just the fact of reading the Bible through and then having conversations really, because I was excited about that. You were
Right.
excited about that.
Yeah. But at the same time, while we did that, we also took time as a family to do things together. I mean, we'd go out to pizza every week, or we'd, I don't know, just visit people. We always were active and doing things. It didn't, but here's the key. The priorities in our marriage, actually I heard this in a sermon one time.
Which was actually really good.
And here were the priorities, okay? So we had our life, we had our marriage, we had our children. I had a job, we had a church. And
I was a stay-at-home mom.
And you were a stay-at-home mom. And so here's our priority. The first priority in our life for each one of us was God himself, all right? The second priority, our spouse. The third priority down the line would be the children. The fourth priority would be my job.
Right.
I had to provide for the family. And the fifth priority was church and church activities and church commitments. Not to confuse God and church.
Right.
All right? Church is a community of believers. We were dedicated and involved in our church, but our church would not take precedent over our relationship with God or over our relationship with each other. Or our children. There were times when we would lead worship, for instance, we both play guitar, on a Wednesday evening Bible study, but by the time our third came along, we said, this can't be. The children need to be in bed. It was getting a little bit too late. So, that took priority, and I know there are times people put their church commitments over, as more important than their family, but no, that's not the case. And then still we'd get the children to bed early enough where we would spend time together. And we'd have a lot of conversations together, and it was very important for us.
And in this time when we were kind of adjusting our priorities after hearing that at church, and the Lord was confirming it. I remember coming home from Vacation Bible School, all the kids, we were in it, and I had dropped something off at a lady's house, a friend of mine. She had some children, and she had invited me. It was just a morning vacation Bible camp or Bible school. I'm not sure what they call it.
VBS, yeah.
And she invited us to stay for lunch. And I'm thinking, I would love to do this. This is, that would be very satisfying for me. Some of the kids, they would love playing, but I also had little ones. They needed to get home. They needed a nap. So I'm thinking, okay, I would love to do this, but I need to first take care of my children. So I decided not to stay. I gave the woman a hug outside. I didn't even, get the kids out of the car. Went home and I had this thought, your clothes are contaminated. It's kind of like, that was a weird thought. So I changed all my clothes. I find out the next day, this woman had been babysitting or taking care of some child who had lice. Her whole house was infected with lice. Had I not had those priorities, I would have been dealing with a house full of lice, having to get rid of. I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Your stuff, bedding, so much work, but because I had the right priorities, God spared me.
Yeah.
And then there was another occasion shortly after this where, again, a woman had wanted us to come over, but I mean, which is fine to do on most things, but there was a check in my heart that my kids, they needed to be down for a nap, and so I declined, even though I wanted to. And I think our basement the sewer started backing up, or there was some major thing in the basement. Had I not been there, I would not have caught that, and we would have been dealing with so much problem. So the Lord was teaching me, have proper priorities, with that I need to take care of my children, and and then also, like Robert said, the spouse. So the Lord was saying, yes, have priorities.
And the other thing is, that as the dad, the husband in the relationship, I was not of the mindset to watch out for my needs. Like, I'm not a golfer, for instance, so I didn't spend Saturdays away, or what my priorities were to be a husband to Ann, and to be a father to the children. And I had my opportunities. I traveled a lot in my job, so I was away plenty, that I didn't want to spend any more time away from the family. And as we said a few minutes ago, our spouse relationship, our marriage, was even a higher priority than the children. And the reason for that is, and it might sound strange, but the reason for that is the children will be happy if we have a loving relationship. The children will be healthy emotionally if our priority is each other. Mm-hmm. If our priority is them, and that brings conflict between us, like we don't agree on how to discipline, or we don't agree on what we want to do, if there's conflict between the husband and wife, the children, that will affect the children. It'll affect their happiness. It'll affect their emotional health.
Now, and when we say priorities, we're not talking about feeding your children, taking care of them.
Right.
I mean,
well, these are obvious things that have to be done.
You have to take care of your children. There are basic needs that they have, but sometimes I think parents can make their children all-consuming, that they ignore their spouse, and that's when there starts to be jealousy. Right. There starts to be problems.
Yeah. Like sometimes ignoring is the best technique when there's misbehavior. For instance, when you have a child who is having a tantrum, a little one, and just loses it.
Which every child
eventually has
a
tantrum. Or you don't have to have more than one or two, believe me. And because the technique is, make sure that the area is clean and let them at it. They can scream, they can kick, they can cry, and you don't reward it by giving them any attention. You just say, okay, this is what you want to do, and you turn away and you have a conversation with your wife, your husband, and or you deal with the other kids. You have your dinner, let them off in the other room. You're gonna cry, okay, go over there. And believe me, after you do that once, I think it was once, we didn't see it again. Mm-hmm. They don't get any reward. Mm-hmm. And we maintain a healthy relationship, realizing we're on the same page in this issue. All right.
And another thing that happened after our third, you had won an awards trip for his work, and it was 5 days.
In the Virgin Islands.
Yeah, at St. Croix.
Yeah.
Everything paid. Airfare, food, lodging, everything. And it's like, oh gosh, we can't do that. We have these 3 little kids. The oldest, at the time of it, wasn't even 3. So we had... And
then the newborn.
Right, and we had a newborn. And then, we're thinking about it, and we talked to...
Your folks.
To my mom, just kind of mentioned maybe the possibility of them watching them, and they did agree to watch them. I was nursing, so I started pumping milk so that there'd be a supply, and we did go away for 5 days. And now I have to say, what that trip did for me was it made me realize this is a very, very short time.
Having little children.
Having little children, this is going to be gone so soon. And it gave me the I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do this. I can go back. I can take care of my children. Before you know it, they're going to be grown. And
it's so true.
And now it's like they're all gone.
From the perspective of a young parent, this is going to take forever. I have a 1-year-old, I have a 2-year-old, a newborn, or several.
So
but it goes so fast. Now our children are adults that are our friends. But, and then you arrive into grammar school years and then high school years. Each stage is different. You gain a lot of independence. As soon as your oldest is 11 or 12, you have a babysitter, if they're responsible. And they will be responsible if you treat them.
You train them.
You train them and give them responsibilities as they grow and trust them, but have high expectations for their behavior, all right? It's a wonderful time, and we also...
And we had so much fun.
We had so much fun. We were just talking about this yesterday.
We went on vacation every year.
It was so fun when the children were little because they were always excited about everything. We're going to go in the car and we're going to go for a ride. Yay! When they're little. Grammar school or younger.
Making up songs about, getting in the car without our shoes and socks on. Little dance.
In the evening, I bought a big van and it had a CD player, and we didn't have a car with a CD player before that, and so I had a video or a CD of Strauss music, and I brought that along, and everybody's kind of bouncing in the seats to waltz music, and we just drove around the town, and everybody just enjoyed it. We always went on vacation. When I was a little boy, my family, a big trip was 60 miles. We never went anywhere, overnight. Period. We might go out and have lunch at a McDonald's somewhere far away, and that was it. But so I always said I want to go on vacation. So
when you were a child, you're looking at a map of the U.S. Those little puzzles.
Yeah, I was 4 years old. I remember sitting on the dining room floor. The sun was beaming in the window. My mom was in the kitchen. I was the youngest. I was the only one at home, and I had a puzzle map of the United States where you have the states, kind of a wooden puzzle, and I put the pieces together. I remember looking at that and going, where do I want to go? And I pointed to the far northwest corner. I grew up in Chicago, city of Chicago. And in the far northwest corner would be the state of Washington, Seattle area. I didn't know anything about what was there. I just knew it was the farthest place, and that's where I wanted to go. And that was my personality. I was not unhappy at home. I just wanted to go places, and in my career I did go places.
Traveling.
I was traveling. And that's what I wanted my children to experience. So we always went. We went to the mountains. We drove to New Mexico. We drove to Colorado.
Initially, we flew because you had so many
miles. I had all these miles. Yeah, we'd fly to the farthest place. I remember one time we flew to Vancouver.
All 8 of us.
Yeah.
Flew.
Nine of us.
Was she?
Yeah,
No.
Julia. I was there. Yeah. Oh no.
She wasn't born yet.
She wasn't born yet.
Yeah. But so we would go on these vacations. It was always so much fun.
Yeah.
And it was, you'd go on. Our son, when he was, I don't know how old, on one of the trips, when we're landing, he's like, this would not be good now.
He's like 4, right?
Yeah, a little kid.
And he starts yelling, looking out the window, we're going to crash, we're going to crash, we're going to crash. And the people around us are like, I don't know if there's anyone afraid of flying, but it wouldn't have been a good thing for that person.
No, and today that would not be, there's a lot more issues with.
Yeah.
But at the time it was kind of funny.
So we enjoyed our life. We enjoyed each other.
Mm-hmm.
We were together on our decisions on how to raise the children. And
we made sure, our children were trained.
Yeah.
Because if you have children who are out of control, life is not fun.
That's another subject we could talk about sometime.
Life is not fun.
How to train.
But if you train your children, by the time they're 2, it should be really the wonderful 2s, not the terrible 2s.
Right.
If they haven't been trained, it will be the terrible 2s, and your life will be miserable.
And it's easy to train a 15-month-old.
And it's a lot harder to undo what the damage in those just 6 months, 8 months where they should have been trained.
Yeah.
It's much harder to undo. It can be done, but it's much harder.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have well-trained children, you can go anywhere.
So often we
enjoy
would
life.
sit in a restaurant with the whole family, and somebody would always come up, or 2 people would come up and say they would marvel at how well the children sat and behaved in a restaurant around a big round table, a large family, and say, this family is amazing. We weren't doing anything special at that point, but we had trained them, and they were happy.
So we still could go out. Now, the cost of going out as a large family is another question. But, so we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, we did have a lot of fun.
So it's possible.
You can have a happy marriage and children, more than one even,
And
several if you like.
Enjoy the whole process.
Enjoy the whole process.